My rich mother-in-law pretended to be poor to test me, so I made her regret it. My name is Carol and I'm 34 years old. Our marriage has had its share of UPS and downs, but one thing that has remained constant is my complicated relationship with my mother-in-law. Victoria is a highly successful businesswoman commanding respect and always getting what she wants, but with that success comes a sharp edge. She pushes those around her, and more often than not I felt like the main target of her tests. Right now things are especially difficult. I'm completely broke. The tension in Victoria's elegant dining room was almost suffocating. It was the night of our monthly family dinner, and her words sent a shockwave through the conversation. The room fell silent. I looked around at my three brothers-in-law, Robert, Charles, and Edward. Their expressions ranged from concern to outright confusion. Under the table, Michael squeezed my hand, offering silent support, but the weight of the moment bore down on all of us. What do you mean, broke, Mom? Robert, the eldest, asked. His voice was measured but filled with concern. He set his wine glass down, his focus locked on Victoria. For a woman who exuded power and control, Victoria suddenly looked vulnerable, something I'd never seen before. At 65, she had always been poised, but tonight was different. The bank is about to foreclose on the mansion, she admitted, frustration lacing her voice. My investments, everything is gone. I'm bankrupt. A stunned silence settled over the room. How is that even possible? Anna, Robert's wife, blurted out. Your business is you've always been so careful. Victoria ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, a rare sign of unease. A series of bad investments, she said curtly. I trusted the wrong people. Now I have to sell the mansion and I need a place to stay. The air in the room grew heavier, as if the walls were closing in. The weight of unspoken thoughts pressed on all of us. I'm sorry, Mom, Charles said hesitantly, but we just bought a new apartment. We barely have space. We're still renovating. His tone was apologetic, as if hoping to soften the blow. Piper, his wife, kept her eyes fixed on her plate, clearly uncomfortable. Our house is too small, Edward mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. His wife, Mary Kate, nodded in quiet agreement. I watched Victoria closely. Something in her expression made my stomach twist. Over the years I had learned to read subtle tells. The way her fingers tapped the table when she was anxious, the glint in her eye that hinted at a deeper plan. Before I even realized what I was saying, the words slipped out. You can stay with us. We have an extra room. Michael turned to me, caught off guard, but I didn't blame him. Compared to his brothers' estates, our home was modest, and Victoria had never exactly been warm toward me. But I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. The room fell silent. Again, every eye was on me. I steadied myself. I have some savings, I added, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. It's not much, but it could help with your immediate debts. Victoria's gaze locked onto mine. Her expression was unreadable. You would do that for me, she asked, her voice colder than I expected. I met her stare, keeping my tone steady. Of course. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the overlapping protests of my brothers-in-law. You can't do this, Carol. This is insane. Think about it. Robert's voice was sharp with concern, but I held my ground. Over the following weeks I worked relentlessly preparing the paperwork to transfer my savings and rearranging our home to accommodate Victoria. Then one afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, ready to sign the transfer documents, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Victoria standing there holding an envelope. Her smile was different this time. Something about it unsettled me. Carol, darling, she greeted in her usual tone, but there was an edge to her voice that sent a chill down my spine. I think it's time to explain a few things. Before she could continue, the front door burst open, and my brothers-in-law stormed in there, faces red with anger. Mom, Robert shouted, his voice booming. You can't be serious. You're really going to trust her with everything? Victoria rose slowly, her posture straightening as her commanding presence returned. Sit down, everyone, she said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of authority. It's time to reveal the truth about this little test. My heart stopped a test. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's smile shifted, one I had never seen directed at Me before you, she said, are the only one who truly understands the meaning of family. The envelope in her hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, and in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. Again, the atmosphere in the room changed. As Victoria settled into the armchair in our modest living room, the contrast between her designer outfit and our simple furniture was stark, but it wasn't just appearances that made her seem larger than life. It was her presence, the way she effortlessly commanded attention. As you all know, she began, her voice cutting through the silence. I built my empire from nothing, but what you don't know is that before I met your father, I came from humble beginnings. Robert opened his mouth to protest, but one sharp look from Victoria silenced him. And then it hit me. The woman who had always tested others had just set me up for something far greater than I ever could have imagined. Several months ago, I received a medical diagnosis that shook me to my core. She revealed. The room went still. A quiet unease settled over everyone as her words sank in. It turned out to be a false positive, she continued, her tone steady, but it forced me to think long and hard about something bigger, my legacy. A heavy pause lingered before she finally spoke again. I asked myself, who will I leave everything I've built to? Who can I truly trust? She reached for the manila envelope on the coffee table, her fingers gliding over it before pulling out the documents inside. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost theatrical, so I devised a test. Charles's hands trembled with anger. This was all a lie, he demanded. Victoria met his gaze without hesitation. A test, she corrected firmly, and the results were revealing. With that, she spread the documents across the table, photos, emails, text messages, each piece carefully curated, forming the full picture of her calculated plan. Robert, she began, her voice unwavering as she addressed her eldest son, while you thought I was bankrupt, you reached out to my competitors and sold them confidential company information. Robert's face turned ghostly pale. Beside him, Anna, his wife, shrank away. A mix of disbelief and horror crossed Charles's face as Victoria's gaze landed on him. Next, Charles, she continued, her tongue unwavering, you contacted a real estate agent to appraise the mansion, intending to buy it at a fraction of its value and flip it for triple the price. Beside him, Piper broke down into uncontrollable sobs, mumbling incoherent excuses under her breath. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she turned to the youngest, Edward. She said, her voice sharp, you and Mary Kate attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent just so you could seize control of my businesses. Michael, my husband, sat frozen in disbelief. How could you? He whispered, his voice filled with shock. But Victoria wasn't finished, and that's not all. She pulled more documents from the envelope, laying them out one by one. While you were all scheming to take advantage of my supposed downfall, I took the liberty of investigating your finances. The three brothers visibly paled. Robert, she revealed, her voice unyielding, you've been embezzling company funds for years. She shifted her gaze. Charles, you've refinanced your home 3 times to cover for gambling debt. Then a pause, and Edward, she let the weight of her words linger, you've been selling confidential company information to our competitors. For months. The room erupted into chaos. Shouts, accusations, Piper sobbing hysterically, Mary Kate screaming that it was all a misunderstanding, Anna staring at Robert, her expression filled with raw betrayal. The air was thick with tension, suffocating silence. Victoria's voice cut through the noise like a whip. The room fell into an eerie stillness. Then she turned to me, Carol, her tone softened slightly, but there was still an edge to it. You were the only one who offered help sincerely, with no hidden motives. You were even willing to sacrifice your savings. She pulled out the final document, thicker than the rest, holding it up. She spoke with steady resolve. This is my new will, signed and notarized this morning. A collective gasp filled the room. Carol will be the main heir to all my companies and properties. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert shot to his feet, his face red with fury. You can't do this, he shouted. We're your children. We deserve this. Victoria's reply was ice cold, precisely. Her gaze never wavered. I expected more from you. Her words sliced through the room like a blade. Carol has shown more integrity and family values than all of You combined, but she doesn't know anything about business, Charles blurted, his voice rising in desperation. She's just an elementary school teacher. He meant it as an insult, but Victoria only smiled. A teacher, she repeated with a knowing smirk, who has been studying business administration at night for the past 3 years. Isn't that right, Carol? All eyes turned to me. My heart pounded. It was true. I had been taking night classes, studying in secret, determined to gain a deeper understanding of business. The only person who knew was Michael. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's gaze was intense. I've been watching you more than you think, she admitted. I saw your grades, your dedication, your work ethic. While my children lived off my money, you quietly built your own path. She stood slowly, moving toward the window. The setting sun framed her silhouette, casting long shadows across the room. Starting tomorrow, she declared, Carol will take control of the daily operations of all my companies. I'll oversee the transition for the next 6 months. Edward's voice was barely above a whisper. Anessa's face had gone pale. Victoria turned to him, her expression colder than ever. All of you are fired from your positions in the company. You'll have to find work elsewhere if you can. She let that sink in before adding, and I'll be sending detailed reports of your illegal activities to every major company in the industry. Another round of protests erupted, but Victoria paid them no attention. Instead, she walked toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Stopping in front of me, she placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Are you ready for this, Carol? Her eyes searched mine. I glanced at Michael, who smiled at me with quiet pride. His nod was a silent reassurance. I wasn't alone in this. Yes, I said, steady despite the nerves building inside me. I'm ready. Victoria gave a satisfied nod. Good, because this is just the beginning. The following months were a whirlwind. News of Victoria's bold decision spread fast, dominating business headlines. Unexpected heir, elementary school teacher takes over corporate empire. The transition wasn't easy, far from it. My brothers-in-law refused to accept their fate and weren't about to go down without a fight. Will contest the will. Robert threatened at a tense family meeting, his voice dripping with anger. Victoria remained calm, almost amused. Go ahead, she said, a knowing smile playing on her lips. All the documents proving your illegal activities will become public court records. That shut them up for the moment, but it didn't stop their sabotage. One morning I arrived at the main office to find critical company files had been wiped from the servers. Robert must have thought he'd won until I casually revealed the nightly backups I had been making. A teacher is always prepared, I told him, watching as security escorted him out of the building. It felt like a victory, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Charles, ever the schemer, switched tactics. He spread rumors among employees, questioning my ability to lead and casting doubt on my qualifications. The office became tense, whispers of uncertainty filling the hallways. I didn't engage. Instead, I introduced an employee benefits program when Victoria had postponed for years. During a staff meeting, Victoria addressed the team with unexpected warmth. Sometimes it takes a teacher to understand that a company's true value isn't in its assets, it's in its people. The employees responded positively. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. They no longer saw me as just an outsider, but as someone who genuinely cared. Edward, however, was the most persistent. He tried bribing board members to vote against me. His plan failed spectacularly when I played back the secret recordings I had made of his conversations. Victoria smirked as we watched Edward being escorted out of the boardroom, his face pale with shock. I learned from the best, I told her, but it wasn't just my brothers-in-law working against me. Their wives got involved too. Anna, ever the manipulator, attempted to organize a client boycott. Her plan backfired when I launched a new eco-friendly product line that doubled sales in the first quarter. Piper, determined to outdo her, leaked what she thought was confidential company information to the press. What she didn't realize, I had been feeding her false intel from the start. Tracking the leak had been part of the plan all along. Mary Kate, however, was the only one who came forward to apologize. I'm sorry, Carol, she said, her voice filled with regret. We let greed blind us. I accepted her apology but kept My distance Victoria had taught me that trust once broken is not easily restored, especially in business through it all. Michael remained my unwavering support. I always knew you were special, he told me one evening as we sat at home, reviewing reports. That's why I fell in love with you 6 months after Victoria's decision. The transformation was undeniable. The companies were thriving. We had streamlined operations, introduced new corporate responsive policies, expanded internationally, and increased profits by 40%. Victoria was more than pleased. You've exceeded all my expectations, she told me during one of our monthly dinners, a tradition we had grown to cherish. I had a great mentor, I replied with a smile. Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, her expression thoughtful. Do you know why I chose you? She asked, her voice quiet but firm. It wasn't just your integrity or intelligence. I saw in you what I saw in myself 40 years ago, a hunger for knowledge and a commitment to doing things the right way. As the months passed, my brothers-in-law eventually gave up and moved away. Robert found work at a small company, earning a fraction of his former salary. Charles was forced to sell his home to cover gambling debts. Edward landed a job at a competing firm, but in a much lower position than he had ever envisioned for himself. A year later, I hosted a company-wide celebration at Victoria's mansion, now ALS. My main office employees and their families gathered to enjoy the event there, laughter and conversations filling the air. Victoria watched the scene unfold, children playing in the garden while their parents enjoyed the buffet. Why are you doing this? She asked. I glanced at the crowd, taking in their smiles. Because a company isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet, I replied. It's a family, and unlike some, I understand what it means to take care of family. Victoria gave a nod of approval, her gaze warm yet sharp. You've learned well. I looked around, watching the employees enjoy themselves. You know what's ironic? I said, turning to her. Your children were right about one thing. I am just a teacher, and that's exactly why I understand that real power doesn't come from controlling people. It comes from helping them grow. 2 years later, the company had tripled in value. Michael and I still lived in our modest home, though we now had an office in the mansion. Victoria had officially retired, but we continued our weekly dinners, strategizing and sharing insights. Last week, I received a letter from Mary Kate. Apparently, Edward wanted to come back. When I shared the news with Victoria, she raised an eyebrow. What are you going to do? I smiled. Exactly what you taught me. I said, give them a chance, but make them earn it. Victoria's eyes gleamed with approval. You, she said with a smirk, are my best investment. And so the simple teacher, once dismissed and underestimated by her in-laws, became the leader the company needed, not because she sought power or wealth, but because she understood that true success comes from treating people with dignity and respect. As I always remind my employees, sometimes the best business lessons are learned in the classroom. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.